Hello, good evening. My name is Becco Pen. You are watching Rappler, and I'm in front of the historic Club Filipino in San Juan City, where just a few moments ago, the Duterte, or former President Rodrigo Duterte, officially endorsed his 9 candidates for senator in the 2025 midterm elections. Originally, yung billing ng event na ito ay PDP Laban Proclamation Rally, pero parang, kumbaga yung slate kasi ito, halo-halo na rin. Speaking of the slate, they're composed of a mix of former officials, former aides, and PDP Laban officials as well, to include former PAGCOR board member Jimmy Bondoc, re-election is Senator Ronald De La Rosa, who was also Duterte's police chief at the start of the drug war. We also have re-election is Senator Bongo, who was Duterte's chief aide in Malacanang. JV Hinlo, a PDP executive, is also running for senator. We have Raul Lambino, former advisor to former President Rodrigo Duterte. Dante Marcoleta, who represents Sagip in the 19th Congress, is also running for senator. Apollo Kibuloy, who was once the spiritual advisor for Duterte, is also part of the lineup. Of course, Kibuloy was not physically present here because he is under detention. Vic Rodriguez, who was once was turned into one of the staunchest supporters of Rodrigo Duterte, round up the 9-person slate that the former president, who by the way is running for, is seeking a return to Davao City Hall in the 2012 elections, in-endorse niya kanina dito sa Club Filipino. We'll talk about the history of Club Filipino and how it wasn't emphasized at all during today's event, but we'll talk about that later. But first, let's focus on what did happen during the kickoff today. So we have 9 candidates under the Duterte coalition, or the Duterte-endorsed coalition. Of course, because it is a kick-off rally, they, kumbaga, nilahad nila kung ano yung mga priority issues nila or priority legislation nila. Hindi natin iisa-isahin yung lahat ng priorities ng 9, pero may commonality kasi dito. Isa dito yung promise to continue the drug war as Duterte, or at least advocate for continuing the drug war as Rodrigo Duterte created it. Another is to subsidize PhilHealth. On the note of PhilHealth, another promise that the 9 candidates also shared was to invest more budget, or at least allocate more money for social services, although they did not mention how exactly they plan to do that, just like the admin coalition a few days ago. And finally, there was a general promise to be tougher on corruption. So yung understandable highlight of today's proclamation rally was the speech of former President Rodrigo Duterte. It was an hour-long speech, very classic Duterte. No, he was reading off what seemed like talk points, and yet he still managed to insert a lot of asides, anecdotes. May konting mura dito at doon, may mga joke, some of them inappropriate. But I think one of the, at least the more noteworthy na asides at mga hirit na Duterte. Una dito, he repeated his earlier allegation against President Marcos that he allegedly uses drugs. But parang more than that, interestingly enough, parang talagang he criticized Marcos not so much for that allegation that he's made before, but for supposedly falling short of their promises. And he emphasized the administration's supposed failure to address 3 major issues that he pointed out Filipinos care most about. First of them, the prices of food. He emphasized yung presyo ng bigas. You have to recall na President Marcos, when he was still a presidential candidate, promised to bring the price of rice down to 20 pesos per kilo. We are far from that promise. Currently, another thing that he emphasized was the job creation. And finally, yung supposed prevalence of crime in the Philippines. So, interesting to note na in Lawag, President Marcos, painted 2025 as parang this choice, no? Between the current Philippines, which the Marcos administration tags as Bagong Pilipinas, and the Philippines under Rodrigo Duterte, which Marcos painted as a pro-China Philippines, a Philippines where blood was shed because of Oplan Tokhang or the drug war. Duterte did the same earlier. He also parang made it a choice between the current Philippines and the Philippines under him. Only, of course, he flipped the script and made it so na parang kumbaga yung dating Pilipinas ay mas okay, or dating state ng country it was better. And he interestingly did this by asking rhetorical questions. Sabi niya, parang kung gusto ba daw, I'm paraphrasing obviously, but he asked the audience, composed mostly of the supporters of his 9 candidates and also mga die-hard Duterte supporters. This was literally a chant during the event earlier, Duterte forever, Duterte pa rin. yung tinanong niyo yung audience kanina or yung crowd kanina kung nakakabili ba daw kayo, kung mas madali nang bumili ng pagkain, edi iboto nyo yung slate ni Marcos. Sabi niya kung mas madali na makahanap ng trabaho, edi vote for the Marcos slate. And finally, if you are able or you feel safe walking on the streets at night, edi vote the Marcos slate. Interesting that he picked these three things because based on a Pulse Asia survey back in November 2024, itong inflation, pay increase, and job creation or the availability of jobs were the top three concerns for Filipinos. To be fair, this is consistent throughout the years. Now, these are usually the top concerns of Filipinos, mga economic, job, and food security concerns. Fourth, among the top concerns of Filipinos was crime, and fifth was peace and order in the country. Interestingly though, medyo distant fourth. So yung top three talaga, inflation, pay increase, and job creation. Based on the November 2024 survey of Pulse Asia, medyo nag-slip yung approval or yung perception ng mga or how Filipinos perceive how well the Marcos administration is addressing these key issues. So if you notice, in comparing and contrasting what was then and what is now, Duterte focused on these gut issues. Literal gut issue, yung pagkain, yung sweldo ng manggagawa, at yung job security or yung availability of jobs. Whereas Marcos emphasized less gut issue things such as foreign policy, specifically how the Philippines deals with China in the West Philippine Sea. Another issue that Marcos emphasized, yung graft and corruption, and also yung drug war policy ni Rodrigo Duterte. Why are these comparing and contrasting rhetoric super important? Kasi narratives matter in an election. Speaking of narratives, parang one line that seemed to really resonate, or at least the Duterte candidates wanted to emphasize, yung hirit ni President Marcos during Lawag, na parang yung ibang kandidato daw ng ibang slate, parang nautusan lang na mag-deliver ng suka, nag-file na ng Certificate of Candidacy or COC as senator. Paulit-ulit na ginawang hirit ito ng mga senatorial candidates Duterte during the proclamation rally earlier inside Club Filipino. Naging cheer actually ng crowd at one point yung suka, but that's besides the point. But let's also emphasize what was not said. Okay, one thing that is a major issue, obviously, or an issue that will cast its shadow over the 2025 elections, especially for senatorial candidates, is the impeachment of Vice President Sara Duterte, the eldest daughter of former President Rodrigo Duterte. Interestingly enough, former President Duterte himself did not mention Sara Duterte's impeachment during his hour-long speech earlier, not at all. Walang ni isang mention, but the senatorial candidates of the Duterte slate did mention this several times in different ways, pero parang one of the ways that they mentioned this was to emphasize that they need the numbers in the Senate in order to acquit Sara Duterte in the impeachment trial. She only needs 8 votes for an acquittal in the Senate. Of course, they also emphasize na kailangan natin ng numbers sa Senate in order to be, quote-unquote, the genuine opposition to the Marcos administration. There was also no mention of the historical significance of Club Filipino, which a lot of us expected for them to highlight during this proclamation rally. So the hall behind me, the building behind me, Club Filipino, is where Cory Aquino in 1986 took her oath as president during the People Power Revolution, which of course ousted Ferdinand Marcos Sr., the father, namesake, the late dictator, who is again the father of the current president, Ferdinand Marcos Jr. So may convention or may thought na baka PDP laban, as led by Duterte now and his allies, wants to emphasize that part of history because PDP Laban, of course, played a huge role in resisting and opposing the dictator Marcos back in the day. But interestingly enough, it was only former Executive Secretary Medeldea who even made a passing mention of the historical significance of Club Filipino. None of the other candidates mentioned this. Even si Senator De La Rosa, nung tinanong namin kung anong ibig sabihin na nasa Club Filipino yung kick-off, sabi niya lang, sinabihan daw siya na pumunta sa club. So pumunta siya sa club. Hindi na niya iniisip or he didn't pay attention to what the meaning behind choosing this as the venue for the Duterte-led or the Duterte-endorsed. Palipasin muna natin yung ambulance kasi medyo maingay siya. So as I was saying earlier, there was interestingly enough, no mention of the historical significance of Club Filipino. But you see, parang kumbaga may narrative din siya, no, na parang perhaps it's an attempt at associating, at least for the people who would know enough, no, the history of Club with what PDP Laban is trying to do, positioning themselves as quote-unquote the genuine opposition to Ferdinand Marcos Jr. So to conclude, it's a battle of narratives for the 2025 elections. Siyempre, hindi lang naman yung Duterte slate at yung alyansa para sa Bagong Pilipinas slate ang magtutunggali itong 2025. Pero ito kumbaga yung biggest in terms of political clout, in terms of winnability na rin kasi the Duterte slate of 9, 2 of the candidates are winnable, quote-unquote, based on the latest Policy Asia survey. That would be re-election of Senators Bongo and Ronald de la Rosa. Yung alyansa naman, 10 out of their 12 are considered winnable in the 2025 senatorial race. So we will be paying close attention to how these narratives may be changed. Again, I want to emphasize that fact na si Duterte emphasized gut issues. Marcos did not. We'll see if that'll change as the campaign progresses, as we see preference surveys, the weeks and the months progress. And again, I want to remind everyone that messaging does matter in an election, especially when your voters feel the pinch of inflation, feel the pinch of food prices going up, and feel the pinch of the economic situation. If you want to continue the conversation about the Duterte slate's message, Duterte's hour-long speech/ramble, you can download the Rappler app or you go to the Rappler website. Join us at the Philippine Politics Community channel. We can chat there. I'm there. Other reporters are there. Experts, editors from Rappler are also there. We can bring the discussion, well, my one-way discussion into a two-way discussion, multi-way discussion over there. Keep it on Rappler. We will be giving you updates throughout the 90 days of the campaign period. 90 days pa to for national candidates, and at the midway point for 45 days, the local candidates will start campaigning as well. Again, this has been Bea Cupin. You have been watching Rappler. Thank you for tuning in. Bye.